Rhythm, tell us more.
That's right.
As Mr. Memon joins us.
That's right. In fact, Sakal, thanks for that. Let's also quickly go across to Majeed Memon. Majeed Memon, you've seen a lot of these cases. You know what happens in these cases. What do we make out of the NIA charge sheet that clearly pinpoints fingers at the ATS? It demolishes the ATS's case. We also have citations in the army that prove he was a gallant officer. He was given awards by the army. Today, his bail plea comes up in the Supreme Court at a time that for 9 long years, he continues to be in prison.
Well, 9 years is too long a period for any person to be kept incarcerated for any accusations. In fact, this only reflects the poor system where, an under-trial prisoner has to spend as long as almost a decade awaiting the fate of his criminal accusations. That is one. Number two is that although the accusations in this particular case seem to be very serious, and therefore one has to be very cautious to see that the offender doesn't get away, nor is the innocent made to suffer, because we have to strike a balance between these two situations, which is the key of criminal jurisprudence. Now, I must tell you that here what we are being told is that one particular investigating agency calls him a hero and exonerates him from the charges. The other investigating agency is making allegations against him of some serious nature. And since the accusations are so very serious that one cannot simply be guided by certain people, certain group of people who may be trying to either shield him or who may be trying to either implicate him falsely. In both the situations, the result is miscarriage of justice. The matter being in Supreme Court, it is better we should not comment.
In fact, I would just like to give an alert on what's been happening, Mr. Memon. The hearing has begun. Hari Salve is arguing in the top court for Purohit. We're breaking this down for our viewers. Even stay on with us. Hari Salve says the supplementary charge sheet that was filed by the NIA in 2015 demolishes the ATS's case. He says 9 years, there have been no charges framed. Interim bail has also not been granted. Where is the criminal judicial system in the country? So, Mr. Memon, even as you're talking about both the sides having had some problem, the ATS and the NIA, question that is being raised in his bail plea today in the Supreme Court by top legal Hari Salve is, where is the criminal judicial system in the country? For 9 years, this man is languishing in jail, one after the other. The accused are being given bail, but he continues not to. Several other things cited by Mr. Salve. He calls it a scathing indictment. He says Purohit attended meetings as a military mole. He says the ATS forced the witnesses to make the statements. The ATS did not collect evidence properly. Dubious methods were adopted by the ATS, something that the NIA charge sheet also says. At such a time, Mr. Memon, don't we need to question what happened in the case that was unable to give justice to a man who's supposed to be India's unsung hero?
See, I will have to exercise constraint because the matter is under consideration by the highest court today. So lest our comment, in any way influence the course of justice. This is my primary duty, that I should abstain from prejudging something which is under consideration of the judicial forum, the highest judicial forum of the country. But I would just tell you that whenever such a situation occurs, it, reflects very badly and poorly on our criminal justice system. Number one, such a long time for a person who is behind bars to wait for the justice system to decide whether he is guilty or otherwise. Number two, that two different agencies are giving contradictory versions with regard to his innocence or guilt, which is again a matter of great surprise and shock for all of us, because both ATS is also a special investigating agency, so is NIA, which is a national investigating agency dealing with highest, type of crimes. So both these investigating agencies having taken divergent views, it is certain that one of them is not correct. The other may be, one may be correct, the other may be incorrect. Now, one who is not...
But, Mr. Memon, the question that Republic is asking is, why, when there's an intra-war between two agencies, should an innocent man suffer? He's been in
Absolutely.
jail.
This is
We've seen the
precisely.
documents. The documents with us show us he was brave enough to go to Uri to prevent an attack in 2001. A citation by the army was given. Also,
No,
how do we
I was.
explain the fact the army continues to keep him after the court of inquiry on its roll pay?
No, I must tell you one thing to your viewers that look here, one of the two agencies is certainly wrong. Now, which is the agency wrong will have to be first identified. Number two, then we'll have to find out that why is that investigating agency wrong? Is that investigating agency making a serious, honest mistake, or they are falsely implicating or
Yes.
falsely exonerating some person? In either case, that particular agency or the particular officers who could be identified, must be dealt with a firm hand of law.
And if in fact the ATS did make these questionable arguments, if they did plant the RDX on a source of Colonel Purohit's house, Mr. Memon, if they did go forward and deploy dubious methods here, on whose instructions was this being carried out? Was this a ploy against Colonel Purohit? Was this a bigger picture in which we have to also undertake? There were other people who were accused in the case one by one. All of them are getting bail 9 years later, except for Colonel Purohit. What could be the larger conspiracy behind Colonel Purohit continuing to languish in jail?
No, it is not, fair on our part to jump to conclusions in such a sensitive matter. But we will have to wait and watch. But of course, it is necessary for the investigating agency which was on the wrong track needs to be identified. Then number two, the individual officers who are, involved in this kind of making false investigation. And then, of course, they could be interrogated and it could be found out whether they were doing at the instance of somebody or it was their own, on their own volition. They have adopted a wrong course to mislead the administration of justice.
Mr. Memon, the question that we want to also ask you is, there is a statement with us of an accused of a person called Nitin Joshi. He'd given a confessional statement at gunpoint to the ATS. In the court of inquiry that had conducted this, he's admitted to them that at gunpoint I was told to make a statement or there would be a false encounter killing of my family and me. It was a threat to my life and that's the reason I had given the statement against Colonel Purohit. Such shocking statements coming out against the ATS. At another point, we are being told exactly what the ATS made him write down in his statement. The ATS's case against Colonel Purohit was twofold. One, that RDX was found at his house. It is so ridiculous, Mr. Menon, to actually fathom how RDX reached his house. It was there for 3 years. 60 kg of RDX. Can we believe that a man kept 60 kg of RDX with him for 3 years? And one fine day, he gave a part of it to the accused who were committing the Malegaon blast. And he said, okay, you take some of it from me. When they were asked in the ATS how this RDX reached his house, even a more bizarre evidence was given by the ATS. They said he came and cleared security from the airport to the capital and other places, but the RDX was thrown in the river by him and then he collected it. Bizarre explanations by the ATS, planting of RDX in a person's house. The case by the ATS demolished by the NI in its supplementary charge sheet. Today, Hari Salve, even as we are speaking, speaks on in this case and he says, where is the judicial system in the country? For 9 years, this man is languishing in jail. Don't you think action needs to be taken against the ATS also here?
No, certainly. You see, whether it is ATS, NIA or anybody else for that matter, you see, be you ever so high, the law is above you. This is the phrase we must follow. And now in this particular case, when you talked about confession, of course, it seems very serious on the face of it, prima facie, that if a person in custody is at a gunpoint made to say something, it is horrible. And it only reflects or betrays our, investigating system and the abuse of by the investigating officers. But you see, such person needs to be cross-examined. And unless he is cross-examined, the whole truth will not come out. So therefore, it would not be fair on my part or your part to draw conclusions or say some kind of something in judgment. We'll have to wait for the law to take its own course. Everything is to be done according to our settled law. But it certainly smells of something larger conspiracy and something dereliction of duty at the highest level, and also dishonest way in which the investigating officers are abusing their positions. So all this need to be, corrected so as to see that the belief of the people in our criminal justice system doesn't get beating, because we are losing faith of the people. Why the crimes are growing? You see, we are seeing the crimes are growing in our country because the people have lost confidence in our investigating agency, in our judicial system. 9 years a man has to wait in only to be determined as to whether he has committed crime or not, only because two investigating agencies are at loggerheads and they are just speaking something contrary to each other. What is the fault of the man concerned who has suffered 9 years incarceration? So this is indeed a very shocking and surprising.
Majeed, Memon, stay with us. Let's also take our viewers through what's happening in court. Stay with us, sir. Let's tell our viewers that top legal of the country, Hari Salve, who represents Colonel Purohit in those bail hearings today in the Supreme Court, he expressed shock and he has now told us why is the criminal justice system in the country suffering. Purohit has attended meetings as a military mole. It's also being said, now remember, Purohit was actually an intelligence officer. He'd already infiltrated into SIMI and ISI. He'd made great sources. There are praises that I've seen in the documents that were shown to us by our sources that are showing not only was he given this information, but it was also very clearly given in a concise manner by him to his army officers. Mr. Majeed Memon, another point that Republic has accessed today, a court of inquiry was held against this man. In that court of inquiry and after that court of inquiry, very importantly, his services were not suspended. On the other hand, he continues to be very much a part of the Indian Army. He continues to languishing in jail, but he's a part of the Indian Army. And the point that Hari Salve makes in court, let's quickly go across to those points because he said three things in court today. He says, number one, the ADS adopted dubious methods in filing this charge sheet against Colonel Purohit. He then says the evidence was not collected properly. He also says the CBI has given findings against ATS officials, which is so crucial. These ATS officials have planted evidence not only in Colonel Purohit's house, but also in other houses, Mr. Majeed Memon. It's a very serious offence. The Malegaon blast happens. The ATS in Maharashtra takes over the charge sheet. It files its investigation. But within that investigation, there seems to have been so many dubious methods that are adopted that today, when the bail hearing is happening in the top court, Hari Salve, who's appearing pro bono for Colonel Purohit, clearly pinpoints every single time his anguish and pain at the criminal system and also at these ATS officers. All right, Majeed Memon is not with us right now, but